Control over the response itself is not being controlled. It is the personality which who drives the response that is getting abandoned. That means I step back from what I do. Sri Krishna says is you have to learn to step back from everything that happens to you. This is called detachment. What is getting detached? The detachment is not from the action. It is the detachment is of the personality, the individual. When the I is getting detached from the action, what happens is that the action no longer has the ability to impact the I. So the I tends to remain in equilibrium. Brahman is a state of null. It is a state where the consciousness is unmoving, it is not moving at all. So, when we evolve or when we emerge from the Brahman, it is not the Brahman that is actually acting, it is us, our identity which is acting. The Brahman creates us only to see for an experience of existence, but the Brahman does not get involved in the action itself. It is the I that is getting involved in the action. Namaste and welcome to another lecture on Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Today we will research chapter 5, verse 12 to 15. Having merged with abandonment of fruits of action, he obtains highest peace. However, he that is driven by desire and clings to outcome is bound to karma. So, what does Sri Krishna mean by this? Having merged with the abandonments of fruits of action, and he that is driven by desire and clings to the outcome is bound by karma. Let us take a look at the movement of chitta. The chitta is one that brings the identity of the other to our senses. It is also that which moves within our senses, taking that information through the entry ports of the ears, nose, and other indriyas that is collated at the organ of collation or the manas. Then that is compared with dharma at the buddhi or the intellect. So the intellect compares the incoming stimulus with the existing conditioning. And that difference tells us whether we like the incoming stimulus or we dislike the incoming stimulus. So if we dislike the incoming stimulus, we'll push it away. And if we like the incoming stimulus, we will pull it towards us. This movement is called karma. And when we interact with that entity which is giving us the stimulus, we will then enter into a transaction. There will be a give and a take. And that give and take will result in an imbalance because always somebody will give more and somebody will take more. When this happens, then there is a debt that is created. This reconciliation of debt is the basis on which we have the concept of samsara or rebirth. Because anytime you get into a debt with somebody, you have to repay that debt. And that is the reason why we always ensure that we keep our debts to the minimum. Now, this cycle of rebirth can be stopped if we stop incurring debt or we remove the personality from the action. But in order to do that, we need to be able to control the movement of the consciousness because the consciousness is the one that is bringing the data of the incoming stimulus. It is the one that is then carrying that data into the manas or the cognition, the cognitive apparatus. Only when we are able to control that incoming stimulus and its movement within our consciousness will we then be able to get control over our response. In the control over the response itself is not being controlled. It is the personality which who drives the response that is getting abandoned. That means I step back from what I do and then I no longer expect good or bad outcomes. I accept whatever outcome comes to me without happiness or sadness without duality. When I am able to do that, I am at peace because nothing that happens as feedback is able to derail me. If nothing can derail me, then obviously I'm always going to be in equilibrium. And that is what he is saying, that if you are able to control the movement of the consciousness or the chitta, that will enable you to abandon the need for an outcome. The minute you are able to control the need for an outcome, thereafter what happens is that you are able to control the movement of the chitta within yourself. You are then able to get into a state of equilibrium and no outcome can destabilize you. And that's what he is trying to say in this particular verse. Having merged with abandonment of fruits of action, he obtains highest peace. However, he that is driven by desire and clings to outcomes is bound to karma or death. In this case, karma means death and rebirth. That the issue is not about the action itself. It is the personality who is driving the outcome and the personality who is getting affected by the outcome. So we have to remove the personality from the problem. We have to separate the person from the action. Thereafter, what will happen is that the person is able to abandon the fruits of action. The next one is, so he that has detached cognition from action controls happiness. Resting in the ramparts of his nine gated city, not acting nor causing action. What is the nine gated city? The two eyes, the two ears, the two nostrils, the mouth, the anus, and the genitals. These form the nine gated cities. So, how can we control what happens to us through the nine gated cities? How can we remain in this particular sense of complete isolation from the stimulus? It is not easy. Removing ourselves from the outcome or not getting affected by stimulus is very difficult. It takes practice. What Sri Krishna says is you have to learn to step back from everything that happens to you. This is called detachment. What is getting detached? The detachment is not from the action. It is the detachment is of the personality, the individual. When the I is getting detached from the action, what happens is that the action no longer has the ability to impact the I. So the I tends to remain in equilibrium. It is not that the action is actually getting stopped. The action continues to occur. But I have managed to step back and I'm watching the action like as if I'm watching a movie. And even there, sometimes we get affected by the movie. In this case, it means that you should not even get affected by that. So you have to step back to a point where you are unaffected, like a lotus in water. When the water falls on the lotus leaf, it just falls off. And that is the state which we need to practice to bring ourselves to. And that is basically what Sri Krishna is trying to say. So he that has detached cognition from all action controls happiness, resting in the ramparts of his nine gated city, not acting nor causing action. Here I reiterate, it is not stopping of action, it is removing ourselves from the action by looking at the action impersonally with detachment, with vairagyam. And that is basically what he is trying to say. And of course, our nine gated cities are the two eyes, the two ears, the two nostrils, the mouth, anus, and the genitals. Brahman is neither the initiator nor the doer in the created world. Also, not driven by the embrace of the union of the desire for fruits with inherent personality. Brahman does not accept of anyone their merits or demerits. This occurs on account of ignorance, shrouding knowledge in deluded people. This is quite clear. The entire problem of rebirth, karma, and other things occurs because we get personally involved in the action that we do. Our I begins to get impacted by the stimulus, by the process of decision making, and by the outcome. Not only that, after we give an outcome, we wait for the feedback. Oh, how good are we? Do people really like us? That outcome we wait for. And when the outcome comes to us, we then experience like, dislike, good, bad, right, wrong, and all those things. These, the entire process of us existing in the environment is the one that drives us into this creation of debt, which results in our inability to deal with the separation of the I from the action. So it is not that the action is being stopped. No, the action will happen. You must act, because even to maintain your body, you need to eat, you need to breathe. All those are actions. So you cannot run away from it. You have to act. But in the process of acting, you must separate the I from the action. That is what Sri Krishna is trying to say. In these two verses, he is talking about the involvement of Brahman in the action. Because very often we think that God is the initiator of any action. In our system, there is no such thing called God. The Deva is an entity which is a manifestation of ourselves. The Brahman is a state of null. It is a state where the consciousness is unmoving, it is not moving at all. So, when we evolve or when we emerge from the Brahman, it is not the Brahman that is actually acting, it is us, our identity, which is acting. The Brahman creates us only to see for an experience of existence. But the Brahman does not get involved in the action itself. It is the I that is getting involved in the action. Which is why he is saying the Brahman is neither the initiator nor the doer. So, this is a critical thing. The Brahman is not God, because God as a word comes from the Abrahamic base, where they say that God is the creator, the doer, the supporter. He is the one who looks at us to see whether we are doing it right and wrong, and he is the one who ultimately decides whether whether we should go to heaven or to hell. That is not what it is. The Brahman is not that. So, because the God by itself is something, we must remember this. God is something, because to be able to do, God needs to be able to act. That means God is performing karma. In order to perform karma, God has to have an identity. So that identity must have come from somewhere. So something cannot come from somewhere. What is that somewhere? The only place that something can come from is nothing, or the void, or null. And that is the state of Brahman. It is very important for us to understand that Brahman is a state of null, a void. It is complete void, but a cognitive state. That means you should be able to cognize the state of null, the void, and that is the Brahman. It is very important for us to recognize the difference between Brahman and God. God is a totally different paradigm. Here, what is he saying? Brahman is neither the initiator nor the doer in the created world. Also, not driven by the embrace of the union of desire of fruits with inherent personality. So, here again, it's very clear. Desire for fruits comes from personality. So if you remove the personality, then the desire for fruits automatically dies. Brahman does not accept of anyone their merits or even demerits. This occurs on account of ignorance shrouding knowledge in deluded people. What he is saying here is that if you want to evolve, you have to recognize that you have to remain in the state of null, so that just like the Brahman does not carry any karma, you will be able to break the bonds of debt and merge with the Brahman. To reiterate what is karma, so that we get a sense of the challenges available to in front of us. Whenever we receive stimulus, we either get attracted or repulsed by the other entity. This causes a movement. The attraction is called raga and the repulsion is called dvesha. And the movement between the two entities, the relative movement, is called karma. This causes a transaction and that results in a bond. This bond creates a debt because of the imbalance in the transaction of give and take. This debt has to be paid off even if it means taking another birth. This cycle of birth and death is called samsara. The debt that we are creating now, we must recognize that karma is colloquially understood as debt. But actually, karma results in rina. Rina means debt. Karma is action. So we have to always recognize that the colloquial word has got more meaning than what we actually think of it as. So when we act, we create debt. So the debt that we are creating now is called agami karma. This debt goes to the overall general ledger of debt that we carry. That is called sanchita karma. Then what happens is after we die, this reconciliation of debt happens. Then we begin to reflect on what we did and what mistakes we did and what we should not have done. That results in understanding of what is the next step in terms of reconciliation, and that reconciliation and gaps that we had are then reconciled and moved, and we take another birth, and this setting that we come with is called prarabda-karma. So the parents that we have, the siblings we have, the school we go to, the main friends we have, the people we marry, the offices we work in, the colleagues we have, the kind of bosses we have, the ones who make the biggest impact on us. All of these are all preordained because they come with us in order to help us reconcile the debt. Very often we have a debt to them and that has to be reconciled. And that is the reason why we don't really control everything that we think we do. That is why the span of free will is quite dicey. Now, there is another situation. Even though we may have a particular kind of prarabdha karma or what karma we've come with, the overall karma of the earth or the country we live in may overtake us and we will get subsumed in that karma. For example, COVID. COVID affected everybody. So if your karma was one where you were going to go and travel around, you would not have been able to travel. Similarly, if you are living in Ukraine or Palestine, the karma of the country is of war. No matter what you are trying to do, no matter how good or how bad your prarabdha karma is, it will get subsumed in that overall karma. This particular karma is called samasti karma or generic karma. This is something that affects everybody. Nobody can control it. So let us reiterate. Yoga is the movement of the self from turbulence to stillness, from cacophony to silence, from a sense of doership or ahankara to inertness or bhasma. Thank you for watching. Do like, share, and subscribe. For more information, please do visit www.schoolofyoga.in.